This video is going to highlight the Whelen 9E series combination strobe halogen lighthead, which was utilized with the SNF snow sun fog technology, flashing the strobes and halogens together. This also ends up being a story of Whelen entering the ambulance side primary light market, originally as inserts for Weldon's lights, and then moving on to their own max beam strobes, which were roughly 9x7, the industry standard from then on. These used smaller linear strobe bulbs, and an inside was sort of a parabolic shape. Closer to a round light than you would think from the outside. The light distribution was relatively good, and the max beam strobe was and its halogen counterparts were quite popular. In 1992, the twist lock relampable sizes of lights came into play. And then right afterwards, in 95, a linear version of several sizes were available. The twist lock relampable non-linear remained very popular for 4 or 5 more years. You didn't start seeing the linear until the 9E series debuted around 1999. The 9E was different because it had a single screw lens retention method. The pictures often didn't match in the catalogs, but that was really the differentiating factor. All the 9x7 lamps flopped over to 9E. And this didn't last real long, but it was when the combination strobe halogen version was launched, and it's really the only format in which the strobe halogen combination style was made. Later, we reverted to a helix style bulb or a linear bulb, your choice, in the 900 series. Which, when LEDs came along, we continued to just have the linear only or the helix non-relampable style 9x7 strobe in the 900 series. The timeline from when the max beam debuted in the 80s to the early 90s twist lock to the linear option debuting in the late 90s ultimately did end at the 900 series becoming LED. But the 9E series, which is what offered the combination lighthead, was very short-lived. It had problems, it leaked, etc. And I think it's worth pointing out that the combination version was always called 9ESNF, meaning it was always designed to be powered by the snow, sun, fog, or Strobe Plus system. Although it was never really marketed with it, that was always the intention based on the model number. In order to really get them to work, you had to use a combination power supply, like I'm going to demonstrate in the videos. Other products were marketed with these options, and the power supplies were somewhat costly and limited in the number of heads that you could utilize at once. You saw this feature a lot more in the Super Strobe or 360 strobe. It was more popular in the DOT market, and it didn't really take hold in the 9x7 size. And again, you were limited in the number of lightheads that you could use. There was a mini edge version called the Snowflake Bar, which essentially synchronized corner strobes with halogen flashers. An interesting concept, again, didn't necessarily take hold super well. Came out around the time of the 9E, And the 9E is really the only way that you could get these combination strobe halogen 900 series size or 97 series size lightheads. They utilized two snap-in bulbs in each lighthead. They were 27 watt, I believe, and a linear relampable bulb, which was the same size as several other lightheads. And that actually played through even after the 9E was dropped and we got into the 900 series. The bulb, when it was relampable, remained the same, shorter size. And we'll get into a little bit later the space that the halogen flashers are in, how that really was never filled with a reflector. It was more of a blank when it wasn't the 9E series. A lot of this footage showcases the way the power supply supplies comet flash and alternating halogen flashing, and that's a lot of the product. So if you imagine you have this 9x7 sized product that its primary draw is the synchronized market, and the supplies that you have out for that are limited in their number of heads, you end up kind of limiting your market. If you're going for an ambulance, you first of all, you don't maintain KKK compliance, which may or may not matter. And then you kind of outgrow the number of lightheads needed, or at least likely lose synchronization, adding extra supplies. I suppose you could use these on a different emergency vehicle, but since they were most common on the ambulance, all the way from the Max Beam through the 900 series, this was a product that just never really took hold, based upon the fact that it required a power supply that wasn't common with the emergency market and was more common with the DOT or amber markets. And the size lighthead was not common in those markets. So you ended up with kind of a really interesting lighthead that couldn't really be utilized properly by the main market that utilized that lighthead. So we'll have quite a bit of footage here of these two particular examples of the 9E. We'll let those play through, and then we'll touch a little bit on the 97 and 900 series linear strobes and some of the things that they shared and some of the things that they didn't share with the 9E. So enjoy the 9E combination lighthead footage. the 9E version of the 9x7 lighthead was certainly a departure from the standard. You had a single screw at the base retaining the lens and clips at the top, which was problematic, shared by the 810. Even the halogen version of the 9E sported this same sort of lens retention and a little bit more aggressive fluting. But as you can see here, a 9E next to a 97 or 900, the 900 and the 97, which had removable, replaceable strobes and soldered in strobes at certain points in their lifespan, have spots that are essentially look like dead zones. And they are dead zones when you don't place the halogen bulbs in them. In the 9E version, you get little rubber plugs in the 9E version. Next to one another, you can see the 97 or 900 version has gone back to the 4 screws holding the lens, and it has gone back to a clear lens. The diagram of the 9E combo pretty clearly shows the differences in the lens and the lighthead in general. Those rubber plugs were what you would get if you ordered a 9E linear strobe not in the combination version. You got this sized linear strobe with blanks where the halogen flasher bulbs would be. When the 97 was offered by itself in strobe with a clear lens as pictured here, although this is labeled 900 next to it, and when it was 900 series, you didn't have those rubber little blanks to put a halogen bulb because the halogen combo version had been dropped. You got a linear strobe, either relampable or not. Again, there's a difference. The dimensions are relatively similar. The bulb sizes were similar, if not the same. And eventually, the 900 became non-relampable, meaning the whole lighthead was discarded when the bulb burnt out, which was a trend anyway. But that space remained around the same size. The halogen blank or the just blank between the two series were there in both, although there was an option of what to fill it with in the 9E, in the 97 and the 900s. You just kind of had a blank. The screw holes, the corner holes on the 9E were used to hold it to the vehicle, where the bottom hole retained the lens. On the 97 and 900, the 4 corner screw holes were back to retaining the lens and the lamp itself. And as I had said, the 9E wasn't a great design lens-wise. They actually had to offer a waterproofing kit. The snap-in top and single screw led to a lot of leaking, and it didn't stick around long. Here's the 810 next to the 9E. You have similar dead zones, if you will. They are a little bit indented, so there is some flash gathered there, also reflected back from the inside of the lens. But that spot where that halogen bulb went was never filled with a longer bulb. And the 810, as well as the 900, continued to have that shorter bulb, whether it be hardwired or replaceable. You still got that shorter bulb in the larger lighthead with a little blank spot at each end, which you could argue is left over from the halogen option, or you could argue that it is an analog of not wanting to make much longer bulbs, design different reflectors. There's a number of theories as to why you had the shorter bulb in the linear version of the 900 and in the 810 series strobes. In the 9E, it made more sense because you had that halogen option. The flash footprint from the 900 or 97, as well as the 9E, was a little bit more narrow, although to the naked eye, I'm not sure you could really tell. There was flashback from the lens into those mirrored, quote, dead zones, but as you can see, the bulb itself is a smaller bulb that doesn't go the length of the lighthead. Whether or not this affected the overall light output is debatable. You get a pretty good flash footprint out of either style, the 9E and the 900 or 97. Obviously, the lens and the dip down into the little dead zones allows light to fill that area. The bulb not being the full length of the reflector isn't crippling. It's just something to note. And without the halogen option, there really wasn't anything that you could do with that area. There was no option. I think they were still very effective lightheads. The 9E on the right with the plugs in it and no halogen bulbs, and the 97 or 900 on the left with no option there at all. I think both were quite effective lightheads in their own right. They may have had a slightly smaller footprint than a helix style strobe of the same size, and Whelen was pretty quick to bring back a helix style. While not twist lock, it was a reflector based that looked pretty much like a twist lock with a soldered in bulb, and that came back relatively quickly after the period where they stopped offering the twist lock. So they offered the twist lock alongside the linear from 95 till right around 2000, and then there was no non-linear option for a year or so, and then they very quickly brought back a non-linear 9x7 series option, while still running the linear option, whether for legacy purposes, interoperability, different specifications, side output. There's a number of reasons why you may want to keep this lighthead, but there's been a debate about whether or not the sides were ever supposed to be or ever were open. The linear lighthead has always ended at the spot where the socket for the halogen bulbs were in the 9E, and where the dead zone is in the 97 or 900. It's also worth mentioning that I put a incorrect clear, non-fluted lens over the 9E on the right here to try to give a more accurate comparison between the two. I don't think there's a lot of difference in strobe brightness between the 9E that offered the halogen spots and the 97 or 900 that had nothing in those spots. I think they're very similar, but I didn't want the lens to be the distracting factor. So whether or not the linear version of the 97 9E 900 was underserved by its shorter linear strobe and its truncated reflector design is a matter of debate. I think when evaluating the 9x7 platform, it's important to remember that the original max beam strobes were a linear product, although the linear bulb was shorter and the inside of the reflector was rounded. The Whelen 9x7 product did start out as a linear product. It was only at 92 with the twist lock that they became a non-linear product. And then again, when the 900 series non-linear came back after the twist locks went away, here you can see just how similar a 900 helix and a twist lock are. The bulb might be a little bit better designed in the 900 style, but the 900 helix nonlinear and the twist lock style of the 97 are very, very similar. The next segment that you're going to see is comparison of 97 series strobes against 900 series strobes, both of them being helix style bulbs. The 97 being twist lock, the 900 are the soldered in permanent bulbs. I can't see a difference to the naked eye. They're very, very similar to me. Even with the lenses being different, they put out a very similar amount of light. The straight on and off angle are very similar. But I also think it's worth noting that their reflectors are closer to the max beam than they are to the linear versions of the products. It's a more cupped, rounded shaped internal reflector, whereas the linear is more of a scooped or half cylinder. So the final strobe product offered in the 9x7 size, the 900 helix, is very close to the original product. The max beam in reflector shape is close to the 1992 second product in bulb design, and is the least similar to the 9E and the 900 or 97 linear versions. So they're really the odd light out is the 97 900 9E linear. And I think its only real saving grace was the fact that it had the ability to add halogen to it in the 9E version. Once you lost that, or before you gained that, I don't think the linear version was superior. Although I think all versions of the 9x7 size strobes offered by Whelen are absolutely sufficient. I just think it's interesting that the spot in which the halogen flasher lived in the 9E never had anything else take up that space, and that sort of foreshortened area was mirrored into the 810. So can continue to compare the twist lock 97s with the helix style 9000s. Again, I think very similar, and in my opinion, the superior design over the linear, although I do prefer linear strobes in most applications. I think once you get to a certain size, you kind of lose out on some reflector design capabilities in a larger strobe. And you have options like adding the halogen bulbs, or using a shorter linear tube and rounding the reflector like the max beam. But if you just try to treat a 9x7 lamp like you would a 7x3 linear lamp, I think you lose out a little bit. And I think that's the story of the linear 9x7 size Whelen strobes. And the reason why I wanted to highlight the 9E version, because I feel they're the exception to the rule in the sense that they do bring something to the table for that linear design in the 9E. So we ended up going kind of full circle with the strobes in the 9x7 size, and we just ended on LEDs essentially, which is pretty much the story of Whelen products, is they end in LEDs of a similar shape and size. So and that's kind of where the story ends, is different LEDs were developed and the strobe fell by the wayside. I hope you enjoyed watching, and I hope you enjoyed the comparison and the chance to view the combination heads, which I feel were the superior linear version of the 9x7 size. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.